Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
I don't know if Gentleman's Factory are physical spaces or virtual networks. You talk about that, but like, how do we help get a better sense of who's out there and break down the walls that are isolating right now for historically wrong reasons? Because you do want to put the best person in the job, but you need like a full plate of candidates. And I think sometimes that was a bit of a frustration that we weren't at, I guess I can say it now for a couple of years now, all my DNAs or NDAs are off. But, how do you create the pipeline? How do you go out and recruit? How do you go out and get people to feel like they're not isolated and break it down? How does that work at the Gentleman's Factory?
Yeah, well, one, corporations just one have to prioritize it, right? So it's like, if you think about it, if a company is saying that their goal is to have people live on Mars, right? Or if they're building out the most complex technology to have, like I was reading somewhere where they're like discussing having a train from London to New York, and it's like an underground, right? And you could get from London to New York in an hour, right? But then that's going to cost what? Like, I think they said $10 trillion or something, right? So, but like, I'm saying all of that to say that that's complex, right? That's hard. Like going to Mars, right? Or, building a tunnel to go to New York to London in an hour. That's hard. Getting more Black people to work at a corporation is not that complex, right? That's not as complicated as everything else. So I say that to say that it is an organization prioritizing it, right? That's number one. Number two, there are some systematic challenges when you look at how a pipeline is actually produced, right? So what are the quality of schools that certain, people of color live in, right? And what are the opportunities that those students are getting while they're in school, right? And also, what is the culture that they will be walking into? So if I, went to a school in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, a high school in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, where, I am getting straight A's and I'm doing really well on the SAT, right? And then someone else went to a school in Scarsdale where they have the same grades as I, but then the culture of corporate America is more accommodating to those who grew up in Scarsdale because they understand the cultural norms. They understand whereas now, if I grew up in Bed-Stuy and I went to school in Bed-Stuy, I still have the same grades as someone from Scarsdale. Then when I go into the Princeton or when I go to corporate America, I just don't know what those cultural norms are. So then I then get ostracized or maybe even deemed uneducated because I don't understand certain cues that's not the, like I don't know that world, right? And then that world doesn't necessarily or should not equate to my intelligence. But I am graded as, I don't know if he or she would be a cultural fit, right? So it's those things where, you have to take into consideration, because those things doesn't like equate to whether I can or can't do the job.
That's interesting. When I worked for Anheuser-Busch, some of our senior executives were trying to build our international business.
Right.
And they would go to China, they would go to the UK, they would go to, places, particularly places where they didn't speak, say, English.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really want to I would say get involved with the culture and understand the people. They would stay at the Western Hotel. They would eat dinner at the place. Is there a McDonald's somewhere? And it's like, how are you going to understand how to sell beer in China or Chile or Argentina or name the place if you're not out there with the people? And I think, you can probably tell right away, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but we had a woman who was a friend, Julie Sousa, who works at Amazon. And after we did this, like we're doing with you, she said to Ray and I, and we were not conscious of it. It was actually a compliment, but it was like, you never said to me, how do you feel as a woman? You just always said, how do you feel? And she respected that because we weren't trying to stereotype her just as a in this case a white woman. My guess is as you're talking to people in corporations, you can tell right away if particularly the older white person sort of gets it, is pandering, trying to fill a quota, or actually wants to help the process. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, because people will always remember how you made them feel, right? And that's universal. Like one of the things that I do, off topic, but still a bit on topic, is when I travel, and I love to travel, right? And I try not to Google where the hot spots are, right? I just want to go where the locals are. So last year, like I spent a couple of weeks in, not just 2 weeks in Hawaii, and like of course I went to like the Diamond Head and all of the like things, Pearl Harbor, etc. But then I also went to a local softball game, right? I said that's the most local you can get, right? Because I had parents cheering on their child, right? So I'm like, let me feel the energy of the non-Googleable hotspots, right? So it's those things where it's being intentional and being entrenched into a community just so that you could just have a better understanding of it, right? So, that's what I mean by the intentionality. Is it a checkbox or is it being intentional? And also, it's data even show that when you have a diverse staff, there is a lot more production, innovation that could be sparked, and creativity, because you have a variety of different vantage points.
But yeah, I mean, I saw it. I'll try to be brief on this one, but I saw it real time at Telemundo because I worked at NBC when we bought it in 2011 from Comcast, and I went to Telemundo as the outsider, pretty much. Didn't know. I knew the language a little bit, but did not know the culture. Found it to be amazing, and I worked at NBC Sports. I know what they did. I went to Telemundo Sports. I know what they did. It was every bit as good, maybe better. But the NBC guys had this sense of, I don't want to say arrogance or just their or entitlement. I don't know, but they just assumed they must be better, and they weren't. They just spent more money, and so it was one of those things where I really saw, we just need, to your point, you put enough people in a room of diversity, and you get better outcomes, and you work. Some of the life you've been through, I would think, might be something that understands you just can't throw money at a problem. You got to figure out the problem. You got to dig in. Other people came from a world in Scarsdale, right, where they just threw money at the problem and it got better. So why wouldn't you want more of everybody in that room? So how are things going? Like if I were so I did ask you earlier, and I want to go back to that. Is there physical space or is it a virtual community that you've got built there?
Yeah, physical spaces. Yeah. Physical spaces where you can go in, co-work out of there, book a conference room, a podcast studio, a meeting, etc. And then we opened up a new location in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where it's like a barbershop speakeasy, and so you can get a haircut there, and then grab a drink, and we have a really nice outdoor space. It is freezing now, so we're not using it that much, but so to have a meeting there for those who indulge in cigars,
that's great.
Right? So it's communal spaces, and in which we're
Now, do
looking to build out
you
that model across the world.
rely, because I think, at some point I'm going to want to try to help with this. And maybe Tony will too, but I don't want to speak for Tony. Like, do you go to corporations for support? Are you just purely subscription, or do you go to the HR department? Do you go to community? How does it work? What's your day? What's a day in the life of Lindor like?
Yeah.
Wow,
Oh my God. Yeah, right. No, but it is membership based, right? So there is a membership that members pay. And then we partner with a lot of corporations, right? So we have a partnership with JP Morgan where we do like Black Wealth dinners, where, we have their MDs talk to our members over a meal about certain investment opportunities, etc. And then that is what's really interesting and what's powerful with Gentleman's Factory is the fact that our member population, you know, ranges from the, accredited investor to the, high net worth individual, to then also the individual that is just starting out or that just graduated college and looking to build a network, right? So it is a factory, right? So it's vast, in which when we approach, corporate partners, we then say, oh, like, because doing business with a
Sure.
corporation, it has to be mutually beneficial, right? So it's like, hey, like, number one, like, we don't compromise our brand, like, we understand, the value and the trust that we built with the community that, is really sacred to us. So, one, do you prioritize that? And then number two, let's like do some business together, right? So, we host every year this change agent mixer where, we have close to 1,000 people there, right? Physically present, in which, we're honoring, community leaders. And then that's a really great opportunity for a brand to get in front of that, to say that you're, supporting members in the community, right? While also having a very curated audience in person where you can market to, right? So there's a lot of opportunities those ways. So we partner with, some of the banks. We've also partnered with corporations where they're looking to hire certain individuals, right? At like the senior executive lens, so if a bank is looking for an MD or then like for a managing director, or we recently helped someone get one of our members get a CEO job for a really great startup. And there's doing really great work there. A lot of executive recruiters are always reaching out saying, hey, like, we're looking for this type of person, etc. So it's a pipeline in which for which we've cultivated this, and we take it very seriously, right? Because we've built trust with a member population that really values us putting them in position of opportunity. And then also with the corporation, we're not just going to give anyone access to our community without, one, understanding what their motive is, and two,
No, it's an
it ain't
investment
cheap either, right?
that you want to see a return on. To your point, it's got to be mutually
Right,
beneficial.
right.
Tony and I would. Okay, sorry.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, I was saying Tony and I were talking before we got on about the subscription model and wondering how that impacts you based on, my kids, if Game of Thrones is on HBO, they sign up for Max. Game of Thrones is over, they cancel Max. But I'm assuming I don't mean to put what you're trying to do on the same level as watching a TV show, but we know, and you talked about young people today and all the incoming and all that. How does that work? But I'm assuming, I'm not going to assume anything. How does that work?
Well, so our population of members ranges from individuals, our oldest, like 80, right? From 80s all the way to 20s. I'm still trying to figure out the 20s. You know what I mean? That's not my generation. You know what I mean? TikTok and everything and all that stuff. But so given the fact that we do have a wide range of members, that's beneficial. But then also it puts the pressure on us, right? So we have to continue to prove our value so that their quarterly and annual membership continues to,
Right.
so that they don't cancel, right? So it puts the pressure on us, in which is fine, right? Because we have to continue to prove the value, build out the value proposition, and making sure that members are benefiting from the services and for the relationship that they
Makes
cultivate while
sense.
being a member at Gentleman's Factory.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, particularly for the young people, and the fact you have older voices helping. Ray and I go back and forth with this. Is that certain principles of business and life, representing yourself. I feel very strongly we're all a brand. People listening to us today, if there's an idea of what Jeff's brand is, what Ray's brand is, what Tony's brand is. I used to talk about that when I taught at a university level. Um, so to help someone, particularly in their 20s, as they're going off to an interview, as they're building their CV, as they're representing themselves, to get some guidance from those that sort of have been through you know, through the process already. I always like to say experiences, you've been hit by the locomotive, and now if I see the locomotive coming down the track, I can push you off the track as a young person, or keep you on track, if you will. So, and the one thing, Jeff, since it's in a way is a learning experience for our listeners, if you're a man of color in Los Angeles or St. Louis or Seattle, being part of the membership of the Gentleman Factory is still has value. You don't have to be from the New York area. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
obviously a communication process that takes place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, right. So, there is a digital side to what we do, and we're building that out. And then the way that we also see it is that, once we have a certain set of digital members within a specific community, then we build critical mass there, and then we'll, find investors to invest in a physical space in that specific community, right? So, and then that's how we scale, nationally and also internationally.
So if you look back, so it's 2016, and I know we're probably
Close.
within our
Good.
3 minute or 5 minute window, but what? Now I lost my train of thought. How are you measuring, not by data, but 8 years coming on 9 years later, the effectiveness of what you're doing? Do you feel good about where you're going to be, or do you see where there could be more opportunity?
Well, really great question. And a few things. One, I'm I'm not the same person that I was 8 years ago, right? So when I look at just how I've been able to personally grow throughout the nearly a decade, I'm just in awe, right?
Yeah.
So it means that I was praying about, 7 years ago, you know, I, received it today, but I'm like, Lord, why did you give me this, right? That's one. But I see it as like the impact, right? So what are the organic things that happen, right? So, members started businesses together. They've invested in each other's companies. You know, uh, like about 3, 4 years ago, I went to a wedding in Puerto Rico, and the best man. So it was a member who got married, and his best man was another member at Gentleman's Factory, and they met at Gentleman's Factory, and they became best friends, and it was the best man at his wedding, etc. Right? So, there's a lot of those things that happen, and which makes me really excited about. And then, the ability to pivot, right? So I like Gentleman's Factory went through a global pandemic, right? Like we've experienced the killing of George Floyd, and then we're also experiencing the dismantlement of DEI, right? Like there were different mayoral elections. Literally last night we had a mayoral candidate, and we had a fireside chat with him for the New York City mayor. Like every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
we have mayoral candidates coming in to share the platform so that we can learn about their vision for the city. So it's all of these social endeavors that sharpens our community as a whole, but also sharpens the member population. And lastly, it's really just what the scalability of it is, right? So my question that I've always been asking, because like we've to back channel a little bit, like, you know, we were on the front page of the New York Times back in 2019, I think. A lot of press, Wikipedia, all of this stuff. And during that time, on the venture capital side, there was a lot of VCs that were investing in like these community physical space models, right? Led by WeWork. And this was 2019. And then it was a women's social club called The Wing, which they raised, close to $200 million, and they scaled all throughout. Like WeWork was a lead investor. There's like so many of these business models that took venture capital, and a lot of these businesses are no longer there, right? So they're no longer in business. So for us to be in business still, going on 9 years now, and my team and I figured out how do you scale intimacy. Like we built a really great model so that we can scale throughout the city, throughout the country, throughout the world. It's those things that
Sounds like a great story, and I'm really happy that you shared it with us and our listeners and viewers. Couldn't be more happy. We always end with, do you have any questions for us? And we usually, get none or one.
Well, I mean, not a question, but just a comment. I mean, like you gentlemen are absolutely amazing, and I'm a huge fan of the podcast. Thank you for sending me over the link, and I've been listening to a whole bunch of episodes. So I just love the organic, energy that you guys have. And,
it's terrific to have had you, Tom.
Having me on the show.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's, I think it's, that's obviously a very nice compliment because we aim to let it just flow. We don't want to do zero preparation before, but we want it to be organic because that's what life is,
Yeah.
One of the things, again, well, even when I was helping young students, it's like, someone gives a presentation and you're presenting to someone, they ask a question and they go, well, that's going to come up later. I said, never do that because at that point, the person you're selling wants to hear that answer now. Answer his question or her question, and then get back on track. But don't be so rote that it's like, well, that'll come up on page 10 and I'll talk about it then. Be organic. Make it be a conversation. And so that's a great, at least to me, a compliment because that's what life is. It's like you got to roll with the punches and roll with what's thrown you and react.
Too, Jeff. So we just like to roll. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time. Hope you stay tuned, and we will circle back because we're closing it on our first year, and we hope to do this more years. So we'll see how you're doing down the road. Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jeff.